welcome back to our last lecture together. Oh, Monty, it's our last lecture with our wonderful summer crew.
Really? So soon?
Are you going to miss them?
Yes, I will miss them.
Yeah. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into some more genetics. Hopefully I won't go as long as I did last time. But like I said, genetics is a really huge and interesting field to get into. So highly, recommend all sorts of things going on there. So as I was talking about last time, I went over with that Punnett square on how to do how to do a Punnett square to figure out, if you have a boy or a girl, which turns out to be, 50-50. So that brings me to a story when I was teaching high school. And this guy right here, it was funny because I was doing pedigrees, and there's two types of pedigrees I used to teach when I was teaching high school biology. And the first type was the blood type pedigree, and the second type was a sex-linked pedigree. So it's basically a pedigree going down, following something like red-green color blindness through a family. And so I was doing it, and, I kept pointing out that the Y chromosome is actually very small. You're going to see it in a minute. And it's kind of fascinating in the fact that that Y chromosome is actually shrinking and disappearing sort of kind of slowly. Don't panic too much, guys. Don't panic. No panicking. But because, the guys only have the Y, if they pass their Y on, you get a son. If they pass a sperm with an X on, you get a girl. So it's kind of the guy's fault if the, sex of the baby is not what you want, but it isn't like the guy can control it either. So it isn't their fault. Like I was telling about that story of one of my former colleagues who had 3 girls, and then him and his wife decided, all right, one more, and they had another girl. So I looked at him and I was just like, yeah, that's you, not her. So, as I said, back in the day when I was doing that pedigree with the students, one of my students suddenly just went. She stood up. She looked at the pedigrees, going, "Wait! You mean that king? That stupid king? It was his fault. He didn't have a boy." And I go, "Oh, you mean King Henry VIII?" And she goes, "Yeah, the social studies teacher was just teaching him about me, or about him." And I was like, "Yeah." And she's just, "Yeah, King Henry VIII." And she goes, "Yeah, it was his fault." And I'm like, "Yeah, basically, genetically, yeah." And she was like, "That jerk!" She almost flipped her table. She got so mad. I thought it was funny. I had her go to the social studies teacher and tell him her epiphany. It was just the funniest epiphany one of the funniest epiphanies I had in class, or by a student. I enjoy it when the light bulb goes off. That excuse me, that moment where they go, "Ah!" and then they apply it to something bigger. And I thought it was hysterical, even though she almost flipped a test. She got so mad. She was so mad at King Henry VIII. So, it's funny times. Anyway, so yeah. So that's basically how how sex is determined in babies. It's whether basically a sperm with the Y chromosome is carried over, or if a sperm with the X chromosome is carried over, and bada bing, bada boom. The guys are kind of in control without being in control. So, yeah, because us women, we have 2 X's. That's the only thing we can give. We give 100% of X. Now, depending on the X, though, we can actually, because of this, we can mask a lot of issues in sex-linked traits, which is why you don't see a lot of female with red-ring color blindness, because it travels on a damaged X chromosome. And if the guy, because he only gets one X chromosome, then he's got red-green color blindness. But if a woman gets one that's damaged, she's got the other one that's a backup that covers it up. So women, this is our problem. So now I picked on the guys. Now it's time to pick on the girls. Women can be carriers, especially at sex-linked traits. So there's a lot of things, because we have 2 X's, it can cover up. Now, the really cool thing about having two X's is that actually women would have patterns on their skin if we actually had a pattern gene on the X chromosome. Somebody was postulating that a few years back, that literally because every single cell in a woman's body gets to choose between which egg it turns on or turns off, or which X. Because it gets two, it doesn't need both. It only needs one of them on. So every single one of your cells gets to choose, in our female body, which X to turn off or leave on. And every cell chooses differently. So because of this, if you assigned a color to every single cell that gets to choose, which X it leaves on and which X it turns off, we would actually have patterns on our skin. And somebody was doing some math to try and figure out how that would look, which I think would be cool. It's like, dude, why do we not have cool patterns like, animals on with their fur coats and things? I was like, darn, why are we so... I want stripes. That'd be cool. I'd like stripes. Knowing our luck, that would be weird blotches or something. Because humans are dumb when it comes to some of that stuff. Like Monty here. Monty, you've got some great patterns. Why can't we have some patterns like you? Yeah, you're right. I guess we don't need camouflage. Anyway, because we're loud and silly. Anyway, so having X's and Y's is actually kind of interesting. So basically, maleness is derived from the Y chromosome, but actually it's a gene called the SRY, and it's this thing right here. So this is an X chromosome under an electron microscope. Freaky. This is a Y chromosome under electron microscope. See the difference? Yes. It's shrinking too. Don't panic though, guys. Like I said a minute ago, please don't panic. There's actually some reptiles that don't even have X chromosomes anymore, and they're fine. They still have boys. So you may be going, but yeah, in the moment we're fine. But anyway, just FYI, this bit's shrinking. But as long as we got this SRY gene, which is this little bump right here, you get to turn into a guy. And even then, I wouldn't panic about it. They did a huge, if I could find that article, it was actually really good reading. If I could find that and post it for you, I will. About, the X chromosome disappearing. It's actually kind of interesting reading. But anyway, so, however, all of us start off female in the womb. It isn't until the SRY gene gets turned on, test question, that you start developing your maleness. But that's actually why we all have nipples. Have you ever wondered why guys have nipples? I mean, they're not doing anything with them. I mean, much, physically. They're just there. But it's because we all started off as female. So if you ever wonder why, guys have nipples, there you go. Random facts. We all start off women, and it isn't until the SRY gene turns on that you start developing your manliness, or really your maleness, because manliness, I guess, doesn't hit until, I don't know, whenever. Not anatomy and physiology anyway. We more look at male versus female, not manliness versus womanliness or whatever. Anyway, so now, because the Y chromosome doesn't have all the genes that the X chromosome does, which is called hemizygous, by the way, because it's halfy. If males get a faulty X chromosomes, and they don't have a second to cover it up, which I was talking about sex-linked traits. So we have two X's. If we get one that's damaged and has something, the other one can cover it up and work in place of the other one that isn't working that hot. So, but guys don't have that. So that's where we get things like red-green color blindness and other things that run on the sex-linked trait. So Y-linked genes come in three functional groups. We got those with the counterparts on the X, which as you can see is the top part right here. So these definitely have a counterpart right here. So like if a gene is damaged up on this top part, well, the top part of the X can actually clean that up if you don't get too damaged on the same gene. Those similar to genes on the X, so we don't, they're similar. SRY does kind of have something on the X, but it's not the same, but they're kind of similar. And those genes that are unique to the Y, which is literally, again, like I said, there's something that's similar but not exactly the same, and but SRY is definitely only for guys. So anyway, so all of which are passed from father to son and actually affects male fertility. So male fertility does go down the Y with the Y chromosome. So if you're having fertility issues on the guy side, look to dad or grandpa, because there might be, that might be hereditary. All right, now, like I said, time to pick on the girls. Because of this, we women can be carriers. In other words, we don't show the trait, the sex-linked trait, because we've got that backup. Convenient. Unfortunately, though, that means the guys are going to get hit. And you can usually find that you doing a pedigree, which is what I was doing when my student had the epiphany about King Henry VIII. We were doing one on red-green color blindness and seeing how it traveled through a family, through the women who were carriers. And so like red-green color blindness, so you see red and green and it just doesn't come out that way. It comes out kind of gray and some yellow. So red-green color blindness is a good example of this. So, however, there are some other things that you can find in other creatures, not so much us, like dominant X-linked traits are typically lethal to males before birth. So sometimes you'll lose it, and it's usually a dominant X-linked trait. This happens big time. A good example of this is not in humans, is in cats. That's why there are no male, I got that backwards, no male calico cats, with the exception of like 2. And I'll get to why that is in a minute, because that's actually kind of a funky thing going on there. So, yeah, XY, whatever is on the Y cat, if it's turned on for calico coat color, the male will not survive. It will actually abort in vitro and get male calico cats, unless your male calico is a polyploidy in that he has an extra chromosome and he has an extra X chromosome. If he's XXY, then you can have a male calico cat, which I know for sure there's only one in the world currently. I think there's at least 2. I know it's under a handful. But it's rare, and the only reason they're alive is because they have that extra X chromosome, so they're XXY. That's the only time a male calico can happen. Any other time, the Y does not mix with the calico coat color gene, and it does not, it's lethal to males before birth, so that's why you don't see male calicos. You only see lady calicos. I don't know if there's an example of that in humans, though. I'm trying to think, and I can't. I don't remember any off the top of my head. I'd have to look that up. Feel free to look it up yourself and tell me what you find. Anyway, sex-limited traits affect structures or functions seen in only one sex and may be autosomal, like beard growth. Usually us ladies don't have to talk about our beard growth. Oh, are you trying to grow a beard, Jane? Yeah, it's not coming in right. No why. Anyway, sex hormones, premature baldness, that's sex limited. So it's usually only seen in one sex, maybe autosomal. Sex influenced are traits that are dominant in one sex and recessive in the other. This is where male pattern baldness comes in, and horns and sheep. Usually you don't see lady sheep with the horns. You only see the guy sheep with the horns, although there are some species of sheep, but both sexes get horns. So, but for the most part, if you're thinking of Baba black sheep, have you any wool? Usually the domesticated sheep that we've bred out the horns in the females, and only the males have it, so they can butt heads with each other or whatever barn implement is in their way, because that's what they like to do. And goats. Oh, goats. Anyway, I like goats. But I'm also never going to own any goats. I think they're cute. Not near me. Anyway, genomic imprinting. This is basically the severity, the age of onset, and the nature of symptoms varies according to which parent transmits a mutation. So there's chromosome 15, which is genomic imprinting on. It can either lead to Willie-Prater syndrome if they get it from dad, or Angelman syndrome, which if they get from mom. So yeah, actually, depending on who gave you what, you can get certain genetic issues. It's kind of weird. That one I'm still kind of looking into and learning about, going, wow, that's weird. Anyway, so like I said, there's so much in genetics that it's just like, genetics is weird, and I'm fine with that because it just leads to more interesting things to tell you. So anyway, so yeah, so premature baldness and male pattern baldness are two separate things. There's actually a lot of different types of baldness that runs through different families. For instance, in my family, it's definitely, again, a sex-linked trait thing, because it kind of runs down through some of the mothers and whatnot, and hits their sons, which is actually kind of interesting, because my poor husband has male pattern baldness, and his father doesn't. So that came out of his mom's side of the family, because dad's fine, got a full head of hair. My poor husband does not. And luckily, I come from a family where male pattern baldness does not really happen. Hair thinning, yeah, but male pattern baldness, no. So Wesley will probably end up with a full head of hair for the rest of his life, too, because it just really doesn't run in my family. And whatever Rhett has probably is not being passed down to father to son, or else if it was, he'd have a full head of hair like his dad. See what I'm getting at? So anyway, so yeah, my poor husband sandwiched between two men with full heads of hair. Oh well. Anyway, now chromosome disorders. Some of these I've touched on repeatedly, like trisomies, where basically we get an extra chromosome. Remember, that results from non-disjunction. We talked about that when we talked about meiosis, and where where a sperm or an egg, or the gamete is being formed, and the DNA stays stuck together through the two different splits. And because of this, sometimes you get an egg or a sperm without, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, without, and an extra. So extras, like I said earlier, in plants, this is actually pretty good. This is how you make giant strawberries. We just literally make them have more chromosomes, and we get bigger produce. Downside is they taste like water. It's hard to get concentrated taste. We're still working on that one too. That's some more genetics. If you want to get into botany genetics, that's a big, big industry, which is good and bad depending on the different companies involved. Anyway, is Monsanto still around? Heard something about them disappearing, but that usually just means he got snapped up by another company that might be questionable. Anyway, now if you got extra chromosomes, it's called trisomic or trisomy. So trisomy 21, trisomy 13, we've mentioned these before. Now, aneuploidy, basically cells with the normal number of chromosomes are called euploid. So remember, U means true, so it means true number. And cells with an extra or missing is called aneuploid. Remember, A or an means not or non, so they're not euploid, so they're not true. And no, so an means not, U means true, so not truploidy. So therefore, trisomy is also aneuploid, and monosomy. So remember, when we make those, gametes, and one gets extra, that means somebody's doing without one of the chromosomes. And a monosomy, it means you've gotten less than the 46 chromosomes you have. And monosomies are worse than trisomies. Monosomies don't even survive less than trisomies. Usually these don't even get anywhere. Usually fertilization, like we said, when it hits 46, it will fertilize. Which is actually how we've made clones. And I'll get into that. Do I mention Dolly in this? I need to go through these notes again. Anyway, so we did clone something. It was a sheep. That was our first cloning of an animal. And what we did is we just took an empty egg, sucked out the protonucleus, and stuck in the nucleus from another sheep. And because it had the correct number of chromosomes, I don't know what the correct number of chromosomes off the top of my head for sheep are, but whatever it was, that number, it started going because it had the full complete chromosome set, and that's what triggers it to start splitting and turning into a new creature. So literally what we did was we just literally sucked out the protonucleus of an egg, stuck in the nucleus from another sheep, and that literally, and then we implanted it in another sheep to give birth to a clone sheep, and we named that sheep Dolly. Now, Problem is that sheep did not live as long as normal sheep. And it was the same thing for a lot of other animals we cloned, which was most of the barnyard. We cloned a lot of animals. And then finally we put a kibosh on it because all the clones didn't live as long as what they were cloned off of. And we have a feeling that with older DNA, that's an issue. Because DNA actually, every time it goes through mitosis, it actually loses the tips, and they're called telomeres. And that has something to do with aging. We're still learning about that. There's another wide open area you can always go into if you feel like it. So we kind of think the aging is accompanied by every time our cells go through mitosis, it gets more wear and tear on the DNA doing it, and the DNA loses the tips, which seems to have a major impact on aging and revitalization and stuff like that, because the more we lose those tips, the less, every time it goes through mitosis, the less better it is. So we think because we used the DNA from an adult sheep to make Dolly the sheep, she didn't live as long as a regular sheep because she was using older DNA. Now, does that mean if we tried to clone a baby sheep, would they have comparable lifespans? I don't know. And I'm not going to guess because science is all about making liars out of us. Well, it's actually kind of the point. Remember, we want to test it till we get it to the point where we can't disprove it anymore. Proving it? No. Disproving it? Yes. It's all about disproving it until we can't. That doesn't mean we prove it. It just means we disprove it till we can't. So that's how Dolly the sheep came about, and that's why we kind of put a kibosh on a lot of cloning, because we're looking at cloning whole creatures. If we're using older DNA, they don't live as long. And that's not cool. There's a whole ethics dilemma right there. So now we're looking at, would it be cooler if we just cloned organs? Because that makes sense. I mean, if your liver fails, wouldn't it be nice if you had your own, we could just take your genetics and make you a new liver based on that? And that's where we think where 3D printing and biology is going to meet. Hi, Monty. Help me here. This is where we think 3D printing, biology go wee, except you're in the middle. Wee. And hopefully we can, in the future, just take your genes and 3D print you a new liver that won't break down. Or a new organ that you need. So we don't have to worry about organ rejection because we just grew you your own organ. Better, cooler. And then, we take out the liver that's not doing so hot and put in a brand new liver that is going to last a little longer. So... anyway, that's the thought in the future. But who knows where that's going to end up in the future. Like I said, genetics is a huge, wild, and varied frontier right now. And it's really cool the things we do to learn. So, speaking of detecting the disorders, we have lots of different ways to detect it these days. And we're trying to get away from, we're trying to do as much as possible without, affecting the fetus. Like, for instance, we don't want to get invasive at all. We want to try to be as uninvasive as possible and get the most amount of information so that way pregnant mom and, growing baby, everybody's cool and nobody's hurt. Ultrasound detects large-scale issues, which is why you always go in for ultrasounds for a lot of different reasons. That to, figure out the sex after 3 months, and if you want. And other things like that, make sure everything's growing okay, make sure there's no holes in the heart, stuff like that. Like, there was a hole in my son's heart, and that happens a lot when the heart, is working and forming and everything like that. That usually it clears up and goes away, and that's what happened to my son. They found the hole. They kind of said, let's look at it in a month. And I did. I went back in a month, and they checked it, and the hole was gone. And that's normal. That happens all the time. So we use ultrasound, although the babies definitely are affected by ultrasound, not in a bad way, but it does bother them. Like, Wesley was swimming away from it, like, hardcore, like, Phelps Olympic level swimming away, which kind of made me very like, ow. So he did not enjoy the ultrasounds. So yeah, babies can, we think, feel it, and they don't enjoy it terribly much, which is why they get very wiggly sometimes when you chase them around with the ultrasound for too long. They don't enjoy that. Material serum marker tests usually indirectly detect a small fetal liver, which can indicate a trisomy. Usually this is why they take a ton of blood out of you when you are pregnant. I mean, when you get pregnant, they take vials of blood. And then later they take more vials of blood because they've got to do all this different testing. And usually through, our serum, because the DNA of the child does leak out into our system, or the mother's system. So I'm literally carrying around the DNA of my son and my other pregnancy that didn't make it. So it's interesting. It's interesting. So I've got, DNA floating around in me that isn't mine. And we mothers get to carry that the rest of our lives. Now, fun thought, there a few years back, I don't know if this has been disproven yet, but it sounds like there could be something of a correlation between having way too many kids and their DNA floating around in you and some types of cancer. So it could be that, having so many different DNAs floating around just, because could have something to do with possible triggering cancer later on in a woman's life, which is kind of interesting. And like I said, I'm not trying to freak anybody out with that. I'm just saying there was a tentative link and they were looking into it, but I don't know where that research went. So like I said, don't quote me on that one. That's just something I read a few years back. Doesn't mean anything because I don't know how far that research has gone. Anyway, chronic villus sampling obtains examples from chronic villus cells, which descend from the fertilized egg, therefore are presumed to be genetically identical to fetal cells. Amniocentesis samples, which are basically we go and get some of the amniotic fluid with a nice syringe in the belly, and it's not that's the one we try to stay away from as much as possible because we won't want to disrupt that in any form or fashion. That's like last possible result. We're not too keen on going in for amniocentesis samples anymore. That's kind of, we're trying to phase that out because, if you're trying to poke a hole down into the amnio sac, that might cause something. We don't want that bubble to burst until it's time for the baby to come out. And if we do it prematurely and it causes a premature birth, that's not cool. And, that's on us. So amniocentesis is kind of like last resort these days. Not a big fan. We are not big fans of that. We're moving away from it. But in some cases, you've got to do it just in case. I didn't have it done for either of my pregnancies. It's just, didn't need to, because honestly this next one, which is kind of the one I was mentioning back here, this cell-free fetal DNA testing detects aneuploids from fetal DNA in the maternal circulation. So like I said, if you're a mom, you've got your kid's DNA floating around in you. So yeah, they are a part of you forever and ever. So now you've got the scientific to back it up, going, yeah, you're always going to be my baby. Because I've got your DNA floating around in my body forever. It's true. All right. Testing is actually kind of cool. My grandma went and got tested. She got tested through Ancestry DNA. Oh, wow. The information comes back from this. Now, I'm not trying to say, yeah, go do it. But if you're curious, go do it. Now that we've got, the entire genome sequenced, and now we've got companies that will do it. However, it's kind of this is where future technology is kind of looming, especially with identity theft and everything, and that's pretty scary and bad. I know my dad has been through it. That was a whole mess. But it's really interesting to kind of see what's going on with that, because sometimes, putting out your DNA, especially for these companies, especially when there's no laws on the book that says your DNA is your DNA is your DNA currently, which is something that kind of needs to be looked at, especially since we've run into a lot of problems. Like, for instance, how we know so much about stem cells comes from one woman that we basically stole her eggs without consent. And now we have that immortal stem cell line out of this woman that nobody knew we took her stem cells to do that with. So yeah, look up the immortal stem cell line sometime and find out the insanity about that. And that's what I'm trying to talk about. If you think identity theft is scary, in the future we may have to do something about genetic identity theft, which is something we probably, I wouldn't suggest is a great idea, but at the same time we're looking at it because people are sending out their DNA. I mean, heck, they're sending out their animals' DNA to get their DNA tested to see their lineage. There's one for cats. And probably one for dogs. You can literally take, swab the inside of your cat's mouth. Good luck on that. And shoot it off to, a company, and they'll break down the DNA and the ancestry of your cat. And if you have like Heinz 57 cats like I do, that's going to be an interesting one. But it's really fun though at the same time. Also, if you're seeking medical counsel, like if you know something's going through the family, or maybe you've been adopted, that's a big thing right there, and you don't know anything about either of your parents' genetic or medical history, this might be the way to go, like 23andMe. So, it gives you an insight onto your ancestry and things that you may need to be aware of for your own medical choices in the future. So there's that. So you can actually make decisions about things. For instance, like Angelina Jolie, she actually went in for genetic testing because her mother died of breast cancer, and she wanted to know if she would probably get breast cancer later on down the road. And come to find out, yeah, her genes are strongly leaning towards her getting breast cancer. So she went and had a double mastectomy to get rid of it because she didn't want to die like her mom did. So, these are things that this technology can give us answers to that we could use to make better choices for our health and our family's health in the future. But at the same time, we don't need companies stealing our stem cells or even proteins at this point. There was a dust up over Monsanto actually looking at a protein they made, but actually somebody said, no, that's my protein from my body. And Monsanto actually did a, oops, is it? It was. And they got, that's a whole, wild frontier between law and science. It's like, yeah, is your DNA yours? Or can you sell it to a company? Or can a company just steal it from you right now? There's no legal ramifications at the moment for people stealing your DNA. Hence, as we've seen with the woman with the immortal stem cell line, her DNA literally got stolen, and she didn't know it. Nobody knew it. Except the companies that did it. Anyway, Ancestry DNA, like I said, my grandma did it. We found out so many crazy things. They sent a ton of information. She printed it all out because she's in her 90s and sent it down to me, and it was this huge packet about that thick, and it was all about, where my ancestors on my grandma's side came from and everything like that. And it was really interesting reading. They give you a cool map. Like I said, it's a double-edged sword. Please be careful. Think about future ramifications. But at the same time, if you need to do this, I'd highly recommend. It's actually worth the $50. I think it's $50. Last I heard it was $50. I don't know if you want to do it for a family, but watch out. Come to find out, some of the families did this for funsies and then uncovered family secrets that they were not supposed to know. There's a lot of stories about, oh yeah, I did the ancestry DNA and I found out my dad is not my dad. And then all my brothers and sisters got tested and we all found out we had different dads. Lo and behold, those are true stories. So this is, watch out, because like I said, this is really cool and neat information, but unfortunately it's also opened up a can of worms in some families. Them family secrets that granddaddy and grandma didn't want to bring out to the rest of the family. Well, whoops. It happened. It happened to actually one of my other coworkers. Come to find out, one of his brothers is only a half brother, and they never knew it until he did a DNA test over a medical issue. And then come to find out, he found out he was half. And then they all turned around and made their mother fess up. And she fessed up going, yep, I cheated on my husband and made you. But told him that you were his. So he's dead. So haha. And the rest of the family's like, So, I mean, he's his brother. They're, it didn't change the dynamic between the brothers and the sisters. It didn't at all. They're like, no, he's our brother. He was raised as our brother, but he's got a different dad. So, So anyway, so there's my rant on genetic testing, which I think is alternately interesting, but I'm also very careful in the future. But this is also somebody who sits there and, does dumb things on the internet quite often. So, not illegal things. Not since Pirate Bay got nailed. If you know what Pirate Bay is, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, since then I've been an upstanding internet citizen. I just worry about identity theft because it is huge. Anyway, with that said, the last thing we need is genetic identity theft in this world. So, there you go. I did it. I've taught you pretty much everything you need to know in 169. Oh my goodness. You've done it. You've made it to the end. Congratulations, you awesome people. And thank you. Thank you so much for taking my class. I'm so glad that you came and took my class with me. And I hope you had a good time. And I hope you learned some new and interesting things along the way. And I hope it serves you well in the future. So until then, you have a good one. And I hope whatever you dream of comes true for you. And that you have an awesome time doing it. So, see you later. Bye.